Are you ready to jump into some neuroscience? Because today we're talking about hypnotism. Regardless of whether you call this hypnotism or covert suggestibility, there are a specific group of people this works really well on, and then there's a small but specific group of people that this will never work on. There are a couple specific parts of the brain that have to play along to make this happen. The first part is called the dorsal anterior cingulate gyrus. Part of what this piece of your brain does is that it regulates pain, it regulates emotion, and it manages avoiding negative consequences. The big piece of the puzzle that particular part of your brain is responsible for is it produces GABA. For the nerds out there, that means gamma aminobutyric acid. GABA is like the peacemaker in the family. It's like the person who goes to a family holiday and there's always crazy people that you wish weren't there and they're arguing with each other, but they're related to you. And the person who actually tries to sort of mitigate that and play peacemaker, that's what GABA does. It's kind of like the RA in the dorm room, you know, the guy or the gal that is actually part of that floor that's saying, hey, calm down. That's loud enough. Let's get to sleep. Among other things, that's what GABA does. According to the National Library of Medicine, just for your information, it says here that GABA ratios were positively correlated with hypnotizability. This means that if you're excreting GABA in a standard amount and not too little, then you are much more likely to be able to be hypnotized. But that isn't all. Now we got to get to the main player in the game. And the star of the show is called the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex. It sits right here behind the front of your forehead between your eyebrows. The job of this particular part of your brain is to worry about everything that needs to be worried about. To put it into perspective, imagine that it's the middle of winter and you're driving a car full of kids in the back of your vehicle. And as you're driving down the road, you are constantly scanning left and right, forward and backward. You're looking everywhere you can to make sure that if there's anything that may be any kind of a threat, that you are prepared and you are ready because you have precious cargo in the back. In a few minutes, I'm going to tell you which specific type of people that this happens to all the time, and it makes them nearly impossible to hypnotize. So just to be clear, your dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, if it's working overtime and it is looking for threats, that makes a person nearly impossible to hypnotize. We'll get to more of that in just a minute. According to peer-reviewed studies, somewhere between 60 and 79% of people are able to be brought under suggestion, which is what we call hypnotism. The converse of that is about 25 to 30% of people, it's impossible. You cannot get them under suggestion like this. And in this 25 to 30% of people that cannot be hypnotized, guess what? The dorsal medial prefrontal cortex is not just humming, it is sizzling. That's right, it's working overtime. It is managing threats like you cannot believe. Therefore, if it's elevated, then when you try to bring someone under compliance and suggestion, then consciously, they are already scanning the room. Subconsciously, even when they're not looking, everything else is turned on, every sense, whether it be the olfactory sense, which is smell, whether it be auditory, whether it be something that you're sensing as far as temperature, whether you're hearing something, it doesn't matter. Everything is turned on because of the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex. And guess what specific kinds of people that is always running overtime with? People that are on the autism spectrum. This is why many of what are called cluster A personality disorder types, as well as people that are on the autism spectrum, cannot be hypnotized because that particular part of their brain is always working overtime. And some of the people under the cluster A category, this would be the schizo types, this would be schizophrenia, schizotypal, this would be delusional. There's all kinds of different sort of flavors of this. And just as an aside, if you've ever wondered about this, what does schizophrenia mean? Well, schizo is part of schism, which means to separate or to come apart. And phrenia is from phrenos, which is phrenology, which is the skull or the head or the brain. So what schizophrenia means is a split brain. Now, whether or not that is 100% of people is up for debate, but the large, vast majority of those people cannot be brought under this level of suggestibility that we call hypnotism. And one more piece of the cocktail that allows people to be brought under suggestibility is in your cerebral spinal fluid. If you've ever had a spinal tap, you're going to be very familiar with this particular acid type. It's called HVA for short. It's homovanillic acid. Elevated levels of this particular acid also work in conjunction with the other parts I told you about that make it easier for you to fall under suggestibility. And guess what? Over-the-counter antacids will actually elevate this in all human beings. So can people be hypnotized? Certainly they can. Somewhere between 60 and 79% of people? Absolutely. But as I said before, that 25 to 30% of people, it is nearly impossible to get them to fall under the influence of covert, deep-level suggestion, and that's what we call hypnotism.